Hi everybody, welcome to Learning How to Program with Roblox Studio. I'm Aaron from the Funtime Games group on Roblox. And on our tutorial for logic operators, we're going to be going over what they are, how you can use them, and how they can improve your code. For a first step of what they are, we're going to be looking at, what they are. And, or, and not are your logic operators. So, how do you use them and what do they do? Well, if you learned or you watched our previous examples on relational operators or selection statement, we were writing pretty simple if statements. We'd say that we'd have one conditional in them, and we'd check if that was true or false, and then we'd run a simple code, right? We'd say print it's true. So now we know that a number is, let's say, make this 3, right? So we set a variable 3, and we'd say if the variable is less than 5, then print true. So we would print this, and you can see that we might have done it wrong. Hold on, let's see. X is less than 3 is less than 5. It did not print true, or did it? It did something wrong here. Where do we put the script? Let's see. We put the script in the wrong spot. Sorry. Is you want to make sure your script is in script server so it runs. This is our first pitfall tip of the day. So when you go through, you want to make sure that's in that right spot so it runs. And then if we run it again, we'll see that 3 obviously is less than 5. So it's going to evaluate and print our true. So what occurs now is, say if you want to have, and this is where logic operators come in, if you want to have more than one condition, right? If you want to check if a number is less than a number and greater than a certain other number. So how would I write this in my code? How would I check for both at one time? You'd use your AND operator, right? Because you want to satisfy 2 conditions at one time. So AND is something that would do this, and you'd write AND. How you'd write it is you write your first condition, then AND in between your and before and in between your second condition, right? So X is greater than 2. So we have AND is kind of like a between the 2 conditions, right? So, and what we could have now is that we're checking 2 conditions are true in one time, in one conditional statement. And if the whole thing evaluates to true, then we'll run the code. And for the whole thing to evaluate to true using the AND statement, or the AND operator, both conditions have to be true. And that's what AND does to the conditional statement. It ensures that both are true, then the whole thing is true. So as we can see here, we can step through the code and say that our variable x is 3, so 3 is less than 5, that's true. And 3 is greater than true, that's also true. So we have true and true, then the whole thing, the whole conditional statement after this if is true, then we're going to run our code. As you can see, if we hit play again, we're going to have true printed out in our output. So what happens now if we want to use, say, just one of these things have to be true, right? How would I say that? And that's our OR statement. So say if I made this 1, right? Now this only satisfies one of these conditions, right? It's 1 is not greater than 2, but 1 is still less than 5, right? So if I said OR in place of this and we step through the code again using the OR statement, right? How is this different from the AND? Well, first off, let's run through it. We'll say x equals 1, right? So 1 is less than 5, that evaluates to true. Or 1 is greater than true, this evaluates to false. Now the difference with the OR operator than the AND compared to the AND operator is that the OR, any one item of any number of OR statements in this whole conditional set is true, then the whole thing is true, right? Which separates it from AND being every condition has to be true. or it means just one condition has to be true. So once we see our first condition true, we know that this whole thing is going to be true. So even though 1 is not greater than true, this is false. If we do hit play again, we'll see that the conditional statement evaluated to true, and we get our true printed out, right? So that's our and or. So what about our not? Well, actually, before I go into that, I'd also want to explain that you could also use more than one or, right? You could say or and then x equals 5, and you could use more than one or. You're not just you don't just have to use one, right? You could use you could even don't have to use them exclusively. You could put an and in here and put another condition after the and. It does get more complex after that, so you have to kind of really walk through the logic you're trying to make a decision on. But just to be clear, that you can string together many different ors or ands together, and you're not just having to, it's not that you're just comparing one or two things. Now it's that you're comparing one or many things, and that you have a more complex and compound way to make a decision. So those are your and or ors, right? And again, and being all the conditions have to be met, or being just one. So now we move on to not. Not is a little different than both of those two. And the easiest way to show you the not operator is to define a Boolean variable, right? So we're going to set our x variable to true. And now what we're going to do is we're going to say, we're going to run through and do our first little experiment on our if statement. So right now, how you use the not, I'm sorry, using our not statement, or use our if statement, but how to use a not means that you write it like this, right? If not, and then the condition, right? So in our condition, it's just going to be simply the evaluated variable true, just to make it a very simple example, because a not does get tricky if you're not paying attention, very close attention to what's going on, right? And what I mean by that is, what do you think is going to happen if, say, I run this code, right, and I use the not operator on x? And not simply means take the opposite of what this evaluated expression returns, true or false, right? And then feed the if statement conditional, return the opposite evaluated condition, right? So if it's true, if this evaluated to true, not's going to make the whole thing false, right? It's going to send false to if, and the condition is going to be false, and then this isn't going to run. So what's going to happen now is, so what do you think is going to happen then, right? We'll ask you that first and let you think about it, and I'll show you. If I hit print, what should occur, so we've set it to true, right? Not true, so it's going to return false to the if. So what is a false if statement going to do, right? It's not going to execute commands, right? So it's not going to execute that statement block, and we have nothing printed. So even though we set x to true by using the not operator, not takes that evaluated x, whatever comes after it, and then returns the whole thing to the condition as the opposite, right? So if this was true, it's going to take this evaluated true. If you're looking at the whole thing now, if you can imagine this being around that, now your condition is whatever is in x is going to get evaluated first, right? And then that Boolean, true or false, is going to go to not. And not's going to see that, okay, if it's true, I'm going to give you the opposite. I'm going to make this expression, this whole condition statement, false. So if this is false, what's going to happen? Let's see. So if it was true, what occurred was the true expression, or the variable, evaluated to true, not took it, flipped it, made it the opposite of true, which is false, fed that to our condition, our conditional, so our whole condition was false, right? So what happens if we change x to false? What do you think is going to happen if we run this code again, right? Using the same line of code, what's going to happen? We get true printed. And what occurred there is simply that false, or the x was evaluated to false, right? So false got fed to the not. Not said, give me the opposite of false, which the opposite of false in Boolean terms is true. So the whole condition set is true. So now that reads as if the whole condition set's true, then execute this statement block. So you have the it's true printed. Great. So how can I use this in a real world example or a real code example in say a game I write, something I'm trying to code in Roblox? Well, I set up three blocks in Roblox, and they're just all called part. And what I want to do now is show you that I want to make a decision or a condition where I want to select this block and do something to it based on its position, right? And I want to select it with one if statement. So how would I do that? If everything was named the same, how would I grab that specific part, right? Well, we'll start that. We'll go over that together. And to start it, we'll create a variable called parts list, and we'll assign that variable what's known as a table, but we'll call it a list of all the children of workspace, which this function grabs. This function of workspace is going to do that. It's going to get all these children, put them in a list, and assign that list to parts list. So now we can go through the list, and we can go one by one with our for loop, right? And we could go, say, well, what do I want to do, right? I want to select only the parts, right? Because all these are children, right? All these are going to be on the list, but I want to narrow the list down to just these three. So just by looking at it, I can tell their name properties similar, right? So I could do that. I could kind of separate the ones I want using a name. So I'd say as each one loops through, right? As it's going to go through each time. So it's going to go through camera, this, that. I'm going to say if the object, which is k, set to k, and the property of the object name is equal to part, then, oh, and I forgot my if statement, right? Set it but didn't do it. So there we go. All right. Then do this. And what do I want to do? I want to check for a two conditions to be met, right? So what are those conditions? I want to say if k and then same object and the position of that same object, and we want to look for how we can select it. So we go back to our real world and we say the one to the right, and what's its position? 126. The x position is 126, right? So the first one being the first before the comma is x, and if we look to the left, the one we want to select, the middle one, it's 11, and the one to the further left is negative 139. So our pattern is forming there that, okay, this is a negative number, this is our low positive number, and this is positive. So immediately I can think of a way to do that, and this is how it's going to go, right? We could say, since we can select by the x position are different, right? We could say if the middle one's going to be greater than 0, so we could say if it's greater than 0, and it's also less than 100, right? And so if the object position value of x is less than 100, then what do I want to do once I select the right one, right? Once it goes through the list and the loop selects the right one, based on this AND statement, this logic operator, selecting both conditions, right? The only one that will satisfy both conditions is the one in the middle, right? So that's the power of our logic operator, is that we can do stuff like this now, which we couldn't before, right? We could only say the one to the left or the one to the right. Now we could say, give me the one between these two boundaries, between these two things, And then we can even go and expand it to height if we wanted to with a third logic operator if need be, to create another set of bounds in the world. And it's all in how you relate the conditions again. So it's all in how you can relate the positions to, or the conditions to what you want to do. And that's the limitations that really the code has. But anyhow, we'll go to script and we'll say change the brick color to blue. So again, we grab the property, the same object, or the same object, and we say not the same property, but we say the property brick color, and we set that equal to blue, right? Say new and then really blue, the name of the color, really blue. So now it has a new color. So what's going to happen now? It's going to go through the list. It's going to select all the or just select the parts every time it goes to the list. If the part's name is part, or if the name of the object is part, then it's going to check for this condition, right? If position.x is greater than 0 and position.x is less than 100 on that part, then change it to blue, right? And it's going to go through that each time and do those checks each time for for all the children in parts list, right? For our loop. So what's going to happen is it should only detect, this condition should only detect the one in the middle and then change it to blue. So once we hit play, this one, our code will execute, we'll drop into the world, and we'll see this one will be blue, right? If everything goes right. So we'll hit play, and now we have, there's our blue one in the middle that we selected using our logic operators. That'll be our tutorial for today. If you have any questions on how to use the AND or the or the NOT, please leave them in the comments below. If something wasn't clear, if I could explain it better, also leave that in the comments below. And if it did help you, please remember to subscribe. We have previous videos. We're probably going to make future videos. And leave a like. And as always, thanks for watching. Have a good day.